Hello, Hope Nation. This is Tamara K. Anderson. In today's episode, we are going to talk about a word called momentum and how you can start really small and build really big. We're also going to incorporate a little bit of the takeaways from Kelly Walker's episode last week. And I'm going to tell you a story about 2 apple trees that I planted. So stay tuned. Welcome to Stories of Hope in Hard Times, the show that explores how people endure and even thrive in difficult times, all with God's help. I'm your host, Tamara K. Anderson. Join me on a journey to find inspiring stories of hope and wisdom learned in life's hardest moments. Welcome to another Takeaways episode of Stories of Hope in Hard Times. I'm your host, Tamara K. Anderson, and I am so excited to be with you today. Last week we had Kelly Walker, the Queen of Manifesting, on the show, and she is a ball of energy, and she is so fun to talk to. So I hope you really enjoyed her podcast. If you didn't, I suggest you go back and listen to it. But one of the amazing things about Kelly is that she completely changed her life from being depressed and being a video game junkie to what she has called the Queen of Manifesting. She has her own podcast now. She is a speaker who changes lives from the stage. Anyway, her story is amazing. So today I have 3 tips that I'm going to talk to you about. And these tips will help you build momentum and growth. And they kind of have to do a little bit with what Kelly talked about, but I'm going to share some stories. So first, I'm going to talk to you about the power of tiny actions. The second and third things I'm going to talk to you about are things that I ended up teaching at a women's conference last year that I absolutely love, including the parable of my 2 apple trees. So you have to hang in for that one. It's pretty cool. And then a favorite statement that I ran into that has just really made a big difference in my life. So let's kick it off. The power of tiny actions. When Kelly talked last week about being in the depths of despair, of starting to be suicidal and not being sure where she was going to go with her life. She was playing video games all night, sleeping all through the day. She talked about how she got an email inviting her to a personal development seminar. And believe it or not, she took the initiative and she went. It was one tiny step. And attending this one seminar made her want to go to another one. And then another one, and then another one. And soon she was at a speaking seminar. And it was like this little tiny step propelled her forward so quickly. And that same thing is true for any of us. As we start any new goal, whether it is a ginormous goal or a teeny tiny goal, sometimes we need to build up our confidence in ourselves that we can do this. In the fall of 2018, I joined Benjamin Hardy's Accelerated Momentum group. It's called AMP for short. And it is a fantastic group. I learned so much from it. But one of the first things that he taught us was that taking tiny little steps of progress can help us build confidence in ourselves. For example, right when I joined the group, he encouraged us to that day do something little like clean out a drawer or delete an app that we were wasting too much time on, like a video game app or something like that. And that by taking several of these tiny little baby steps of things that you can do in less than 5 minutes, that you are building confidence that you can do bigger and better things. And so I remember that first week in that first month after I joined AMP, I set little goals to, okay, I'm going to tidy one thing every day. I'm going to make little baby steps of progress. And believe it or not, these little tiny things really did help give me momentum. And something about having a clean space to work in also kind of helped declutter my mind. I don't know how that works, but it really does. And so my office had become quite cluttered again as I started this brand new year. And so, believe it or not, one of my January goals has been to declutter something every day. And sometimes it has been as simple as going through my closet and removing 10 things from there that I just don't wear very often and donating them. Another time it was, I'm going to clear off this desk. Another time I cleaned out a drawer in my kitchen. Last night, I actually helped my daughter clean off a kind of cluttered surface in her room. And it was amazing as I was cleaning that off, all of a sudden she just naturally started pulling things out of her closet. So it's funny how when we take one baby step of progress, it kind of spurs us onward. And so there is power in tiny steps. And there's confidence in tiny steps. And so just like Kelly, you and I and anybody else, if you have a big goal, build confidence by doing tiny things. Okay, second story, second tip. And this comes from that women's conference that I spoke at last year. I told the parable of my 2 apple trees. I'm a bit of a gardener. I really like getting my hands dirty. I sometimes wear gloves, but really I prefer to just get my fingers dirty. There's something weird. I don't know. I just love digging in the dirt. Maybe it's something left over from my childhood. I don't know. But everywhere we've moved in our marriage, I have always planted some sort of tree. I love apple trees, and so this happens to be what I planted when we moved here to Utah about 7.5 years ago. I planted a Fuji apple tree and a Granny Smith apple tree because those happen to be my favorite kinds of apples. Anyway, the interesting thing about these trees is even though they got the same amount of water, they got the same amount of light, one of them grew and the other stayed the same size. You guys, I'm totally not kidding here. I'm going to put pictures in the show notes so you can see. After about 6 years of this, and I had pruned the bigger tree twice, it was probably, 15 to 18 feet high. And I took a picture of me standing beside it, just towering over me. And then I went and I stood also beside the little tree that I planted at the same time. And it was seriously 5 feet tall. It was shorter than me. And I just thought, what is wrong with this tree? And so I thought, maybe something's wrong with it. I mean, I'd even given it extra tree nourishment. I'd put some mineral spikes around this tree, and I just could not figure out, why is this little tree, it was my Granny Smith one, why is it not growing? So finally, after 6 years, I dug it up. And here's the interesting thing that I found. I found that that tree was root bound. And if you don't know what that means, it means that the container shape that it was in when I bought it and I planted it, it didn't ever dare grow out of that shape. Even though the container had been removed and I tried to spread the roots a little bit, it never grew out of that cylindrical shape. It stayed root bound. And so guess what? It did not grow. It didn't dare reach its roots out and grow big and strong like the other tree, which I planted at the exact same time. So I even gave it another year. I picked it up, transplanted it to another spot where I could nourish it better, tried to spread the roots out some more. It still didn't grow. The parable of the 2 apple trees, of my 2 apple trees, is, what are we scared of? What is keeping us root bound? Are we afraid of growth? And Kelly talked about this a little bit last week when she knew she needed to sign up to be in that speaking contest. And she went and signed up for the slot after making a detour to the bathroom. because she was so scared. And she went and signed up for it. And the guy asked her, "Do you want that spot?" And she said yes. And then she sobbed as she told him that she wanted that spot because she was so scared to do it. Guys, sometimes these growth opportunities present themselves and we are so scared to do them. But the question becomes 6, 7 years down the road, like my apple tree, do you want to be in the same growth shape that you were when you were planted, or do you want to grow? Do you want to fulfill the measure of your creation and grow and thrive and produce bushels and bushels of fruit? And so that's a question only you can answer. And believe me, I know scary things are so hard. And that's why I gave that first tip first about starting with baby steps and doing teeny tiny things that build your confidence. But those are 2 things. The third thing I'm going to share with you is a short tip, a quote that I stumbled upon when I was preparing for this women's conference. And here's the quote. I could never find the author of it, so please excuse me if I'm not attributing it to the right person. It says, "When you're in a dark place, you tend to think you've been buried. Perhaps you've been planted. Bloom." And I love that quote. It inspires me because all of us have been at dark points in our lives where we feel like God has forgotten us, where we feel like no one knows where we are. We're alone, we're cold, it's in the winter of our lives, and we're like, what is going on? And in those moments, we need to remember a little lesson from the seasons. And that is that spring always follows winter, and summer follows spring. And so if you feel you've been buried for a week, a month, a year, or several years, perhaps it's time to stretch your head up and begin to grow towards the light and bloom and fill the measure of your creation. The cool thing is that once you start building that momentum, you can envision and build any future you want for yourself. If you're not sure where to start, I would follow Kelly's 6-step formula that she taught us last week of manifesting. First, 1, get clear on what you want. 2, visualize it happening, including feeling those emotions of how you'll feel once you do it. 3, declare the goal out loud every day. 4, meditate. Have God teach you what the next step is. 5, inspiration. After you've meditated about that goal, be sure to listen for the inspiration on how you can act on that goal today. What little baby step can you take today? 6, implement it, do it immediately, and keep moving forward, setting new goals, moving forward powerfully. I'd like to conclude with a motivational verse from Joshua in the Old Testament. It is found in chapter 1, verse 9, and this is so awesome and so motivational. He said, "Have not I commanded thee, be strong and of a good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee, whithersoever thou goest." And I love that. It's just saying, be strong, be courageous, don't be afraid. God's got your back. And He does. He totally has your back. And so my invitation to you at the end of this Tamara's Takeaways is to take a small action today. Just do it. Is there a tiny little corner in your house where you can clean it out? And tomorrow, pick something else, clean something else out. And just take baby, tiny steps every day. And then start setting bigger goals, and you will be amazed by the power of momentum that will fill your life, and you will begin growing. You won't be root bound like my poor little apple tree. You will grow and thrive and bloom. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Tamara's Tips and Thoughts and Takeaways. Have an awesome day. Hey, thanks so much for listening to today's show. I know that there are many of you out there that are going through a hard time, and I hope you found things that have been useful today as you listen to the podcast. If you would like to access the show notes from today's podcast, visit my website. It is storiesofhopepodcast.com. That is where you'll find favorite quotes from today's episode and shareable memes. And those are fun because you can share them with your friends on social media. You will also find the links mentioned throughout today's episode, so you don't have to remember what those were. And also all the tips that were shared. Sometimes tips are shared so much throughout an episode you forget. What were those great things? So go to the show notes, storiesofhopepodcast.com, to look up these fantastic resources. You know, if someone kept coming to mind during today's episode, perhaps that means that you should share this with them. Maybe there was a story shared or a tip that they really, really need to hear. So go ahead and share this episode with them. May God bless you, especially if you are struggling, with hope to carry on and with the strength to keep going when things get tough. Remember to walk with Christ, and He will help bear that burden. Above all else, remember, God loves you.